thank you for talking with me. And then I just have a couple questions to start with that are really general. And what's your name?
John Trosino.
And how old were you during Vietnam, like when it started in around 65?
I was about 15 at the time when it started, and yeah, about 15.
Okay. And then where did you grow up when you were young?
In Aston, right across the street from Sun Valley.
Okay. How many siblings did you have?
I had three brothers and three sisters.
And were you the oldest, the youngest,
I am the oldest.
Okay. So, to begin with, what were your views on communism, if you had any, at the time?
Well, just from what I saw in school, and I didn't really think much of it. I know they had their own lifestyle. Uh, I didn't. I was never involved with it. I never saw it over here. Just heard of it, read of it, learned it in school, and didn't really think a whole lot about communism, to be quite honest with you. But because I always thought our lifestyle was just fine, so I wasn't really involved with communism other than what I read or heard. So
What about like your family or the community around you? Was there anything a lot about communism around there, or was it just
nothing at all. We were just straight American family. No, nothing to do with communism other than what we saw on TV or read in books or heard about. We heard of communes, but that came later on in the hippie generation. But other than that, didn't really know a whole lot about communism as far as the lifestyle over here.
okay? So when Vietnam started and you were in school, how did you feel about it?
I was so young, I probably had a lot more going on other than, just sitting and watching the news. I didn't really get involved with that until I got a little bit older. But then, you know, towards my senior year, well, junior and senior year of high school, that's when I decided, well, I'm not going to college. I didn't really have a good job, and me and a couple of friends decided to enlist in the service. At that point in time, they had the draft going on, and my number was kind of low, and I kind of thought I'd probably end up going over to Vietnam. And I didn't want to go over there in the Army because I knew I had a good chance of going there. And back then, a lot of people were trying to avoid that, to go over. You couldn't get in the Coast Guard at the time because it was too packed. There was too many people trying to get into the Coast Guard. You couldn't get in the different branches of the service because that's where everybody went. And they were, at that point, just filled. So I decided, well, I'm going to enlist in the Navy. And my chances of going to Vietnam were probably less than if I had went through the draft and gone into the Army. So.
Right. So you chose like with your friends. So a lot of the people in your class were affected by it. Also, you know, a lot of people who went into it.
Yeah, there was quite a few people. Um, I would say when I was a junior, there were some people that went in the service. Back then, they wanted to go into the Marines because it was macho and all that. But so there were some people that were older than me went into the Marines. Um, but there was just a few of us that went into the service out of my class that I'm aware of. Only a couple of us. I went in with two other people, and what they called back then was the buddy plan, and we went in together to kind of be together when you first go in there, but that doesn't guarantee that you're going to see them beyond that. So, and as it turned out, I never saw them again after that. But yeah, I went in, enlisted in 1970.
1970. So, the president during 1970,
That was Nixon,
Nixon. How
Richard
did
Nixon.
do you have a feeling towards him? Do you think?
I didn't really at the time. No, I mean he was just another president to me. Um, Back then, I didn't even really vote. Well, I was 17, so he just happened to be there at the time when I went in, and I didn't really think. I was young, like kids are now. They probably don't think a whole lot about that. I mean, I wasn't really into politics or any of that stuff at the time. I was too busy doing other things. So,
So, when you enlisted, how did your parents feel about it?
well, my dad had to sign for me because I was too young. I was 17, and I was the oldest. I know my mom, although she never told me or said anything about it when I was around, I know she probably wasn't too happy about me leaving, but she probably felt better that I was going in the Navy rather than in the Army, because if you were in the Army back then, the chances of them sending you over to Vietnam were pretty good. And I may have mentioned that I had a low draft number, and chances are I was probably going to end up there. And I figured, well, maybe I would enlist and try and get a trade and do something else rather than go over to Vietnam. So that's what happened. And my dad signed for me, and I enlisted. You know what I mean?
So, when you did go into the Navy, like, where did you go? Like, what did you do?
Well, I went into Great Lakes for basic training, and then I learned a trade, repairing optical instruments and such as binoculars, telescopes, things of that nature, and periscopes. And it was called the optical men trade. And with that, then I ended up going on my first ship was in Naples, Italy, which was a pretty good distance. We were in the Mediterranean, good distance from Vietnam. I didn't have to worry about going there, although there was only 9 of us in the class when we graduated, and there was an opening for Vietnam, which is kind of interesting story because there was an opening for Vietnam, and usually the person that has the lowest grade in the class is the one that's probably going to end up with that because no one wants to go there. Well, actually, as it turned out, I was about in the middle. There was only 9 of us. I was probably about 4th in the class. So I knew I wasn't going to go to Vietnam. But as it turned out, the top guy in the class picked Vietnam. And he went there because, see, back then, if you went to what they call a war zone, you would get more money. And he was worried about getting more money for his family. And so he decided to go to Vietnam, and that's where he ended up. And I went to Naples, Italy. So I was happy with that, and so was the last guy who was the number 9 in the class. He was glad that he didn't have to go there. So that's how it worked out.
Okay. So, the atmosphere in Naples, is there any certain...
Well, I think I didn't really see a whole lot of negative or positive things as far as the Italians were concerned. And probably because after World War II, what they went through, um, being on the opposite side of us, they probably were on our side at this point in time. And, you know, I think that's mainly the way they felt about it. They were on our side, basically. That's what I saw. They were with us because they had already been down the other road, so I don't think they wanted to go that way. So
And then, friends in either the Navy or in your neighborhood, do you know anyone who went in and served and
there
either?
was, yes, there was a one of my neighbors lived about a block away from me. He went in the Marines, he was a couple years older than me. I was still in school at the time. This was before I went in service. He was like 2 years ahead of me, maybe even three. Lived about a block away. He went in the Marines, and he went over to Vietnam, and he was killed in Vietnam. And his name was McGurr. Can't really remember his first name, but his name was McGurr, and he's one of the guys that I knew
Mm,
that ended up being killed over in Vietnam. Very sad.
yeah. Did you make any friends in there that you know that you had to like leave or
Oh yeah,
anything
throughout when
afterwards?
you go into service, you meet a lot of friends there, and I never actually knew anyone. I mean, there may have been people that had gone to Vietnam after I knew them, but there was no one that I actually knew in there at the time because the war ended when I was in the service. So
Mm.
I got into the service at the tail end of it.
So, when you first went in to when the war ended, how did like your feelings change? Did they change at all towards the war and like why we were in there? Or anything? Did you gain anything?
Well, I just wanted it at the time. I wanted it to end. I wanted it to be finished. You know, everyone was at that point in time. Everyone had enough of it, and we weren't really going anywhere with it. It didn't seem like we were. It was a war that wouldn't end. So I think at the time we were just glad. I know that when it did end, it finally ended. We were happy when we got the news of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we were glad that it had ended. That's for sure.
And then, do you have any feelings about the Vietnamese? Like some of them are coming over, about stories you heard, anything?
I don't have any problem with them at all. I don't. In fact, most of the people I guess that come over, well, now there may be more North Vietnamese coming over than it was when I first got out. But there was quite a few Vietnamese that came over. There's a lot out west, San Diego, L.A., out that area, in San Francisco. Don't see a whole lot around here, but over time, they do migrate out here. But I never really had a problem with them because I know it wasn't really them. It's really the North Vietnamese, I think, that initiate this. And, they have their beliefs, and even today they walk around and all they want to do is get into an altercation, it seems.
Yeah.
So,
So, with the whole Vietnam War, what do you think America could have done differently? Do you think it could have been easier if we did something
well,
differently?
I mean, I hate to say it, but if they'd have gone in there and did what they did in Japan, took care of them right away, and I think that's part of the problem because they didn't want to do it like that, but then you wouldn't have this problem today.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have this problem. If they had gone in, done it, and been done with it, just did what they had to do instead of letting it escalate and carry on and go year and year and year, then I think it would be a lot different over there today. But of course, then you got China involved, and so you had to kind of watch that. But even today, Vietnam's still trying to, you know, get involved with South Vietnam, and you don't want that. But I think if they'd have gone in and just hit them with everything they had back then, we probably wouldn't have this problem today. But that's
Yeah.
the way I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Um, like the radio, television, a lot of it was on the TV, a lot of broadcasting. Did you watch the TV? How did it affect you? How do you think it affected your family watching it?
I did watch it. Um, like I said earlier, I wasn't really into all that back then, but I did see it on the news. And my family, they were all younger than me, most of the kids. I don't think they really knew anything more about it than I did. And my parents, well, my dad was so busy working, I don't think he got involved. He was never a military guy, although other people in my family that were related were. But I don't think they really realized, and back then a lot of people didn't realize because it's not right here. It's not in front of you, so you're just seeing it on TV. So, well, you don't really think that it's ever going to come here. So they kind of didn't really think about it a whole lot, I don't think.
So, when, how, when did you get out of the service?
I got out in 74,
In 70,
1974.
so how did you feel about that? Were you relieved? Feel like,
Yeah, I didn't want to stay in because at that time, well, you could see where things were going with terrorists, and I even saw it a couple of years after that they were starting to go after Americans um, on different like aircraft and things of that nature. Um, and we all saw what happened over time, where they hated Americans. Just about everyone over there, they had a different opinion of Americans, and so they started singling them out and going after them. So that's one reason why I got out. I didn't want to be put in that position. So
so when you came home, did you think your attitude changed? Like, how did it affect you when you came home? Like, the way your daily life?
well, I was glad to be out of the service and just to move on, uh, get a job and move on over here. But and I was glad that the war was over. That particular war was over. Uh, so I ended up getting a job and just moving on.
So, do you visit Vietnam memorials or anything? How do you feel towards them? Parades, all of that.
Well, I go down once in a while. I go down to the memorial in Aston. Been down there. There's quite a few, um, you know, people down there that are honored. They have all the war memorials down there at 5 Points. So I do go down there occasionally, and I support those people.
Have you ever been to the one in D.C.?
I've never been to that one. No, no, never been there.
And then, what do you think the generation now should know about Vietnam, or that they kind of don't know about?
Well, they should look at it. It's history. You learn from history. Um, there's probably a lot of people that have their fathers or even grandfathers, aunts, uncles that were involved with that, and it's good that they know about it, and they should support those people, just like they support military now, and what we went through in Iraq and Afghanistan, and what we ended up doing in Pakistan. So they should know about that.
How do you feel about that war? With the
Well,
one we're in right now.
well, I'm glad we got the guy that we needed to get, first of all.
Yeah.
And things have kind of calmed down since then. But yeah, I I was kind of irritated course, everyone was about what went on. I mean, to say the least. But I was just glad that they got him, and I wish I could have been there myself when they did. See it.
Right. Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Quite welcome.